Hey Banditos, welcome to the first episode of the last week of 2024 for the Dollar Bin Bandits. I'm Mike Farah, and we are excited to bring to you yet another interview, this time with Whitney Matheson, who is a little different than some of our usual guests. She is not necessarily a creator that has come up through the comic book world or the animation world. She, in fact, was the writing force behind Pop Candy, which was the pop culture blog that was featured in USA Today for many years. But now she's struck out on her own, doing all sorts of writing projects in all sorts of media. She is a studio mate with Dean Haspiel. Her latest projects include Trudy Sellout, which is a short story collection, and she has her 2024 collection of diary comics, which is out now. You can definitely check all of her stuff out at whitneymatheson.com. She's on Substack. I really highly recommend her newsletter. She just has such a plethora of creativity going in so many different forms, and I think you're really going to like this interview. So let's get to it. This is Whitney Matheson. And with us today, Whitney, how are you doing?
I'm good. It's great to talk to you, Mike. How are you?
I'm doing well. Um, let's start off with our patented first question, which is how and when did you first discover comic books?
Oh my gosh. Well, mine might be a little bit different than some people you've had on. I did not read comics when I was a kid. I read tons of other stuff, but I grew up in Virginia, but I really didn't read a lot of comic books until I was older and I lived in Chicago. I moved to Chicago in 2000 and I was in my, I guess, early 20s then. And that's when I started reading comics because that's when I started going to Quimby's. That was the height of like Linda Berry and not the height, but there were so many cartoonists in Chicago making cool stuff. Like Chris Ware was doing stuff and Jeffrey Brown, and there were two alt weeklies that published comics regularly. So that actually was my when I first became super, super passionate about comics, and read like every kind of indie thing that I could get my hands on. And then after that, and I was working at USA Today. I worked at USA Today for a long time, for 15 years, and covered entertainment. And that's also when I started writing about comics too, and covering some of that. And then when I moved to DC, I got even more into them and started, going I cover SBX every year. And so my entry was definitely on the indie side of things.
Mhm.
And yeah, when I wasn't a kid who grew up with comics. That wasn't my story.
Well, when you finally did get into comics, was there any collectability aspect to it? Did you like to not only read the comics, but have them sort of on your shelf or
Oh,
around?
sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, everything I got, I still have. I mean, honestly, I'm in Brooklyn now, and a lot of it's in storage in a storage unit in Tennessee. But I still have the stuff that I would get. Like Quimby's was so, so great, and I could discover so much stuff there. And yeah, I loved all that stuff. All of the I really love Jeffrey Brown. I just saw him, and I'm thinking of him too because I just saw him at New York Comic Con for the first time in 15 years, maybe, a couple weeks ago. But yeah, I of course kept everything I got.
Yeah.
And you know how it goes. Once you find something that you're into, it kind of leads you to 12 more things that you're going to be into.
Oh, absolutely. Once you pick up a rock, you find three other rocks.
Exactly.
And Jeffrey Brown's a great great one to get in on. I love his indie stuff, but I also love the stuff he does, in Star Wars and all that, the kids
Oh
books that
yeah.
he's done
I
as well.
I know, I love that. And then when I had a kid, it's like, oh, I love, that I can introduce his stuff and so much of the other stuff to, a new generation.
Yeah. You mentioned already USA Today, and many people may know you from the Pop Candy blog or column, or you can tell me exactly how that format evolved. But first, tell me how you arrived at USA Today and how close thereafter did Pop Candy come about.
It came about pretty close after I got there. I started at the beginning of 1999. I went to USA Today. I mean, it was good timing. I went there right after college. I was always in journalism and like entertainment journalism. And then I happened to graduate at the time when there was a huge dot-com boom and so many places were hiring and newspaper, like everything, things were thriving. And so I started working for their website, but more on the news side and doing like overnight shift in news. And it was all like very, it wasn't what I knew I was meant to be doing because I was much more of an entertainment person. So in 2000 was when I just wrote a column, an entertainment column. And I had a great editor who said, let's put it on the website, let's see how it does. And I kind of did it just as a way to not to do something that I wanted to be doing because it was not super fun being on the overnight news shift. And I did really well. And so I kept doing it every week. And then that kind of evolved into a blog that I did every day. And then by the end, I was probably posting like 10 times a day on Pop Candy. So it became a huge thing. And it was also before entertainment journalism became so niche. So I was covering comics, but I was also covering, and a lot of it was more on the indie side. I was covering film and music and covering going to everything, every music festival and film festival and Comic-Con. And, I did a range of entertainment. There really isn't anything kind of that I can really compare it to now.
Did you have full sort of creative control after those, first few months, even, I suppose?
I did, which is amazing. I was very lucky. I mean, as long as it did well, um, my editors were great and they did give me a lot of leeway and a lot of trust. And I mean, I've always said like that's what the great, no matter where, even if you're at a comics publisher or wherever you are, the best bosses are people who let you do what you do best with minimal interference and micromanaging. And so I was very fortunate in that I could do that. And also my work pulled in a significantly younger audience than the rest of the publication. So I think they liked that. But yeah, I kind of just had the freedom to explore the things I was into and talk to a lot of the people that were really interesting to me. So it was it was great.
Yeah, sounds like a cool gig.
Cool
If
and
I have to say.
exhausting. Yeah, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but doing what you love, right?
Doing
I
what I loved. And I will say there's no way I could ever do that job today. There's no way. I had the energy back then.
yeah,
Um and yeah, I would say at some point it did become a little bit insane. It's not really humanly possible to write 10 times a day.
sure.
Yeah.
You also, I can see from your sort of bio that you've done a lot of writing for other outlets. Um, I don't know if that was during some of Pop Candy or if it was after, but do those kind of opportunities where you're doing, I think you're doing kind of entertainment reporting or journalism, do they come by you pitching stories, or is it more you're getting assignments from other
Yeah, it's a mix of
editors?
stuff. I mean, when I was at USA Today, I did a lot of like TV radio. I couldn't really do things, write things for other outlets. So I was pretty
Right.
exclusive to them. So when I was there, I did, a lot of like VH1 countdowns and like E and all of those G4 when that was around. Um, and then a bunch of like radio things. But then after that, so that ended in, I guess I left in 2014, so 10 years ago. Um, and so since then I've written for a bunch of places. I've like, yeah, various outlets, but I'll be honest, I can't really afford to work in journalism and like I used to. I just can't, the pay isn't there, the jobs aren't there. So the bulk of what I do, I mean, we can talk about like what I'm making, more creatively, which is great. But as far as journalism goes, like I have like a couple gigs here and there, but I just it's not there. The work's not there anymore.
Yeah.
As you know, as everybody knows.
Yeah, it's almost I hate to say it's not a thing. I mean it is in some places and it's some very few uh outlets or media conglomerates or what have you where there's some of that work being done, but I mean it's just splintered into so many pieces and I would imagine that it's very difficult to, do the type of work and get paid for what it used to be when the paradigm has sort of shifted completely.
Oh yeah, there's no way, and especially like freelance, and I've been freelance for the last 10 years and I love it and I can't imagine really going back. But yeah, the stuff's not, the jobs aren't really there. There's certainly not, I used to do a lot of criticism. And that, most places don't have critics anymore. There are not really a lot of working music critics, or publications don't have a lot of TV critics, all that stuff. And there aren't even really newsrooms anymore. I mean, most publications, USA Today doesn't have a headquarters, doesn't have a building in, where in Virginia, where I used to work. Um, a lot of places are just working. It's everybody's from home. So it is a totally different scene. I am grateful I don't have to be part of it because yeah, I'm happy with where I am now. But yeah, it's kind of baffling how much it's changed just in the last 10 years.
You've So subsequent to USA Today and Pop Candy, you've branched out. Yeah, you still do some of this, freelance writing and articles, but from what I can see, you've done things like playwriting, comics, short films, fiction. Uh, is the variety the thing that attracts you, or after having done a number of these different projects, are you starting to think about one specific medium that you like better than others?
Oh, I mean, it's all writing. So I used to call myself a journalist and now I call myself a writer because that is the thing, that's the thread, that's the thing that kind of connects them all. Um, but yeah, I mean, I love doing a variety of things. Yes, I've done a huge, a huge amount, and a lot of it I've done hasn't even been seen yet. I have a manuscript for a memoir that I'm trying to sell. Um, some of the chapters I've posted on my Substack, but I did a couple residencies last year to help me finish that. I have tons of short fiction that hasn't been published, but yeah, I've written a couple plays. One of the plays, a one act, was turned into a short film that was pretty exciting, that went around to some festivals. I share a studio with Dean Haspiel, and that sort of encouraged the comic side of me. So we've not only collaborated on several projects, but I started doing my own comics. So
I wanted to ask about that as we
yeah.
are a comics show. Uh, well, first, I'd like to ask about, being in a studio and being in a studio with Dean. What is that? sort of what does that look like for us that have not worked in a studio? What does that mean in terms of collaboration, in terms of the type of projects you guys do, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you. So after I left USA Today, I actually got a gig as a journalist in residence in Tennessee at a university, Middle Tennessee State University, which is right outside of Nashville. It's where I have family. I had a 1-year-old and was completely panicked, and that sounded like it was a fantastic gig. And I was able to write, and I was also able to teach. And so I did that for 3 years after. And then in 2018, yeah, moved back and was like, okay, I'm a freelance, my kid's in school. I'm a full-time freelance writer. That's what I'm doing. And I would be in this apartment by myself for hours. And it just wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't what I was used to. I wasn't happy. I, had been in a like a newsroom kind of situation for so long. Then I was in like a university situation surrounded by, with the energy and people and ideas um and Dean and I have known each other, Dean Haspiel and I have known each other for a long time. We're not totally sure how we originally met, but I think it's probably when I reviewed something. I wrote some things about his work. So I think that's how we got to know each other, is because I reviewed something he did like 20 years ago. Um, and he reached out to me and said, I'm in a studio with a dozen cartoonists. I think we're pretty close to where you live if you want to walk over and visit sometime. And maybe that was in 2019 or something, or maybe it was. And so I did, and I loved it. And it was like, this is what it's missing for me. And this is like the thing that I need to kind of inspire me and keep me energized and working. And so that then I started going in there and working occasionally. And during the pandemic, the whole studio collapsed because nobody had work anymore and couldn't afford to do it. And so there were just a handful of us left. And like Dean and I have been the two that have and then we eventually moved to another studio. And now we have like a couple other studio mates. But for me, it's just the energy of like being around creative people. And we have a studio in a building with a bunch of artist studios. So I see other people who are making things all day, and they're making all different things. Like they're painting and sculpting and, you know, doing collage work, like all sorts of creative things. Um, but to me, it's just that energy really helps me. I start my day really pretty early because I have a kid to take to school, and I write, and I'm solo for the first half of the day, and then people start to stream in, and that just helps me. I can't imagine just, I mean, many of us did, I guess, during the pandemic, but just being alone all day wasn't working for me.
Do you feel like being surrounded by the visual arts? Because I would imagine Dean and the others are, into the more visual mediums. Um, Inspires you or affects you in some way, even though you're primarily a writer, although again, we'll get to the comics.
Yeah, yeah, I think absolutely. Like it's so inspiring being around people who, but I mean, that's also why I loved my job at USA Today. I got to be around like people who were making music and people, all sorts of people who were making things, and not really so much writers. And writers, I think, are generally kind of boring and introverted people. Like, we're not that fun. But yeah, it totally inspired me seeing the way that people work and making visual work. And I've shared a studio. Like Dean works very analog, and he's, on paper. And then there would be other people in the room like working digitally. And yeah, just it was very inspiring because you don't really get that from a writer. It's all kind of internal. I mean, I can sit next to a writer, but unless I'm like reading what they're doing,
Right.
it's a different sort of inspiration, I think, when you see them creating something.
You're not exchanging words
Exactly.
on
Yeah.
a,
Yeah.
frequent basis. So let's talk about the comics. Here's something that you sent me. Here's an example, the Diary Comics of 2023. When did you start doing these? And what was your, thought process behind it, or even goals behind these comics?
Well, I started during, let me first say that I don't know if people are watching this or just listening to it. I am a writer, and that shows when you see my art style. It is as simple as it gets. I, I've also written some kids' books and stuff, and I talk to kids, and I'm like, look, if I can do this, you can do it. Anybody can do it. But during the pandemic, I started just drawing I think it's partly osmosis. I was around other cartoonists and I saw them drawing, and Dean even joked, he's like, one day you're going to get an art table, like you're going to do this. And sure enough, like I just found it kind of meditative. So every day since 2020, I've drawn one 4-panel diary comic every day. So at this point, I have like over 1,000 of them. And at the end of each year, I published my favorites in a little booklet that's the size of a CD booklet. So, um, yeah, I started it. I partly as a way to do something away from staring at my computer because, all of my freelance work, all of my gigs, I'm just sitting there staring, and to do something physical and be sitting and drawing. And I think I also kind of did it just to keep a record of particularly my child's life. And a record I started in 2020, so just of life at that time and what was happening. So, uh, yeah, I never intended to do it forever, every day. I thought, I'd do it just to get through those hard times, and the hard times haven't stopped really. But also I mean, now I have like, God, 20 tons of these notebooks full of diary comics. And it is kind of amazing to have like this huge record of my life in the last 4 years. So yeah, and people seem to respond to them. People seem to also just connect with them.
I love them. I love the minimalist style. I know you're probably saying that, I have nothing if not a minimalist style. But I find it really joins well with the ideas that are being presented and dialogue, and just with a change of um eyeball, where the eyes are going, you get across a lot, even though the eyeballs may be the only thing other than the hair that is present as a, human figure. Um, do you, when you sit down to do them, because you do them every day, where do you take your ideas obviously from your life, but how do you choose? And is it based on, do you try to find humorous ones? Because oftentimes they're, humorous in some way, dry humor. But
Yeah.
yeah, how do you choose the moments to
I don't
encapsulate?
I don't know. Usually there's like something that stands out. I mean, I'm always kind of taking little notes too. And often, I mean, my now 12-year-old, and I guess when I started, God, I was 8, but it's often like stuff my kid says, or a moment I have in the back seat of an Uber, or there's usually just like something that I can take a note of. But I will say the funniest ones usually end up in the compilation at the end of the year.
Right.
But sure, there have been some that have been serious, but yeah, I don't know. It's surprising. And then I look back and I'm like, oh, I really did do a lot of stuff that year. The days really, they seem like they're repeating, but actually, okay, they're kind of, some things stand out. They're not that repetitive.
Are there ones that you would never published that really truly are sort of for yourself and
Oh,
diary-esque
absolutely, absolutely. And
entries.
I've even done some of those, like the really dark ones you mean, yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that's probably true for everybody. Uh, yeah, there's some that probably aren't fit to be published, or some things that I don't end up writing about. So, yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah. Those go in the real, not the that this is not a real diary, but the non-comics diary,
Yeah, exactly.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah,
With
secret
the
diary.
little locket still on there. Um, so I wonder, and I think I know the answer, but have you have you been inspired enough from some of this, even by osmosis, this sort of creativity, this visual creativity in terms of working with other cartoonists and comics and doing your own diary comics to take the next step? In other words, to do something that is a, I don't know, a full comic issue, or to maybe do some more work on art, that you may even want to do something more I don't know, complex, I guess.
Yeah,
I don't know how to characterize it, but something that sort of takes it to the next level.
yeah, for sure. Well, the memoir that I finished, the original concept was 50, it's 50 chapters, and I wanted each to be illustrated by a different artist. And I've posted a few with the illustrations, and there have been some amazing artists who've done it. But originally I thought, oh, do I do the illustrations for this book? And ultimately I'm like, oh my God, it would take me, I mean, my stick figure diary comics like take me so much longer than anyone I want to ever admit. Like it would just be not for me. But for writing comics, yeah, absolutely. Dean and I collaborated, a year, maybe it was last year, on a comic for Bad Idea, the publisher.
Mhm.
And it was just like a short comic, but that was the first time where I had written a comic that, Dean had drawn, and I'd kind of seen his whole process of, which is always fascinating, of laying out and, you know, going from start to finish. And that was great. And I would love to write something. I don't know about drawing. That's not I don't think that's my destiny to draw like a graphic novel, Um, but yeah, I would love to write more comics. I did a children's book a few years ago called We Make Comics, which is sort of told in comic form. And that's just about like to ease kids through the process and tell them more about the different jobs you can do in comics. And then Dean and I have written, like, also during the pandemic, we wrote a TV, like a first season, like a treatment of a TV show
Right.
that's been down many roads. Like we thought it was going to be animated, but anyway, we're at a point where we're considering like turning it into a graphic novel. So, that would be fun. So yeah, of course, I want to write all the things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of all the things, Trudy Sellout, which, for those of you who are only listening, I'm showing to the camera, which is a short volume of short stories that you've put together in terms of fictional prose. Um, Tell me a little bit about why this format.
Well, yeah, and that format is, I love it, which people, if they're listening, so it's a, God, I don't know how many pages it is, maybe 32 pages. It's even smaller than a novella, very teeny tiny. Um, and some of the stories, I think the longest story might be like 14 pages, and some of the stories are only like 3 pages long. So I just had I have so much stuff. I had so many stories piling up that I had written and wasn't sure what to do with them. And then, oh, I wish I had his name. I'll tell you what it is later. Uh, there was actually another cartoonist who published a book in that size, which is, it's like a very slim, it really is pocket size. You can fit it
Yeah.
in your pocket. And my other diary comics are also very small. And I just loved that format. And I thought, like, God, this is perfect. You can like put it in your purse. You can take it on the subway. You can, like I could sell it at convention. I also just wanted something else to sell at conventions aside from my diary comics. So, yeah, I just like Dean helped out and with like this particularly like the front and back cover, and then Josh Neufeld helped out with doing the layout inside. And I also had this long story, which is Trudy Sellout, the main story in it about this woman who was a famous 90s actress, and she goes to her first convention as a guest. So it kind of made sense, like, people at a convention might be interested in that story. But yeah, I mean, I did that to see, just to put something else out there. I think it's always good to have many projects going on
Yeah.
and get the work out there. So yeah, if that gets the attention of someone who wants more, I've got more.
Awesome. I think that this kind of format, just even doing short stories, are like it's a good kind of taster menu, but also it's good because you can get the sense of your writing, but there's, I feel like, a foundation for making either something longer in prose or for translating into different media.
Oh
And I
yeah.
wonder if that's something you think about with these stories, or even some that you're in your back pocket is, can I do something longer, or, can I take some of these stories and translate them? Because they, especially the title one seems very, um, not exactly, but sort of Kevin Smithy to me.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's in the world of, geekdom, which we are all kind of a part. But I can see that sort of, I don't know, on the ground, almost documentary style kind of, short film for this, or it could be blown out into something much bigger.
Oh yeah, I would love that. I mean, Dean and I co-directed a short film, but yeah, I have the film that was based on my one act, which is Denny Barracuda, and that was like one of the best experiences ever, was working with everybody and getting that made. Um, yeah, I would love for that to happen. And it's funny you should mention that, because in November, my goal is to write one short story each day. And when I'm talking short, like 2 pages or less. And so far, I've done it, but I'm trying to keep up that momentum. I don't know what's going to happen with I don't know. We'll see how I'm going to deliver these. If I'm going to post some on Substack, I probably will. But yeah, I would love to see some of them go to another medium.
I think they definitely lend themselves to a different medium. Although they're very cool to read and very sort of digestible. And I was exactly thinking, it was like, yeah, this would be great on the subway, which I don't take anymore. I used to live in New York, so this definitely is up my alley. But it's still good for other commuting ways, other commuting methods.
And no one
Um,
wants to take a heavy book on the subway. You
no,
gotta,
no,
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, this is, I hate to say because if you don't like it, but it's Kindle sized. And I still like, the physical, obviously, I
Me
think as a
too.
comic fan, even if we sometimes are a little bit more omnivorous nowadays with sort of digital stuff, still the feeling of having something in your hands is, and
Oh
for a
my
creator,
gosh.
I would imagine also it's like I created this. I didn't
Oh,
create, these electronic, ones and zeros. I created
yeah,
something that I can hold in my hand.
exactly. I love the physical object. And I say this as somebody who is probably best known as a blogger, so there was no
Right.
physical. But yeah, when I was on at a residency um last year, I was working on this memoir and trying to crank out chapters. And when I like cartoonists that I worked alongside, when Dean finishes a page, he hangs it up like by his desk. Like all these other, they'll pin it on the wall. So when I was writing these chapters to the book, I was like, you know what? I'm going to print them out and I'm going to pin them on the wall because like just physically seeing that
Right.
work was so much more helpful than just having it sit in my, Google Docs. And so, yeah, anything physical. And, last week I wrote this thing where I ranked my favorite New York bookstores, which are my favorite places to go.
I'm glad they're still around. I know it's been this weird sort of process, right? Where I think the indie bookstores started going away, and then it was the big box stores, and then their lunch was getting eaten by like Amazon and online places, and then the
Mhm.
indie bookstores started coming back, although there have been obviously some that have just survived throughout the whole thing. And so and now we just have, I think, like probably a more burgeoning and healthy indie book store scene than we've had at any other point.
Oh,
Um,
for sure.
because they're like
Yeah.
gathering points now, um, they're not just sort of retailers, they're kind of like, what probably pretentious people call third space,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Between home
No,
and work, right?
yeah, they
Yeah.
really are. That's so funny. I was talking to somebody today, and because there, almost every bookstore that I go to will occasionally have these nights where you just go there and quietly read. So I thought I love it. It's like reading the experience. Like you're turning the act of just read, and they get packed. Like they will sell out. And it's just like people who just want to go to a space, even if they're just quietly reading a book. I think there's a social aspect at the end.
Of
It's not
course.
just sitting there. But yeah, I love that. They're very necessary spaces. Also, I do love my library, which I go to a ton.
Yeah. Libraries are also, I feel like, making or have made a comeback in some way. Every time I see, I live in New England and there are a lot of small towns, but and everybody's redoing their library or has so much going on in terms of events, and but still it's just a great like little nooks and crannies to
Yeah.
get sucked into a book.
And honestly, even in terms of like graphic novels, I'm pretty impressed with like the library and
Yeah.
the number of things that they have, you know?
Right. So I'm gonna go actually back to digital for this question, which is around what Dean and others have been kind of embracing in terms of a new sort of distribution method, which is Kickstarter, and wondering if you've ever thought of, utilizing Kickstarter for either future projects or getting things out there that you're making, and what you think of that platform in general or crowdfunding in general.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think Kickstarter is great. And Kickstarter, if I was at like Baltimore Comic Con and New York Comic Con. I mean, there's so many like cartoonists, and it's because of Kickstarter that they're able to work. I mean, that's how they're getting their work out there. So I love it. I know that I have not had my own Kickstarter project. I think I'm just kind of waiting to see what that is. It's got to be the right thing. Um, I mean, I'm trying to go, yeah, I don't know. I'm trying to go the normal channels for publishing some of the stuff that I've written. And I will say the discouraging thing is it's so slow. And
Hmm.
Kickstarter can be I'm a very impatient person. I of course worked in media that's so fast. And so one of the gratifying things about Kickstarter is, oh my gosh, I have this thing. I don't have to wait 2 years for it to be published. I
Right.
can. So yeah, I think that's gonna happen, but I just depends on like what the right project is, I guess. But yeah, that's where a lot of the most exciting stuff and like daring stuff I think is happening.
Yeah, it seems to be a place where especially indie artists can have their freedom and also be able to connect with people that like their work
Hmm.
in a much easier sort of facilitated way than having a publisher, I think, as the middle, middle person.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I've seen, and even folks that, work for the bigger publishing companies, they'll do Kickstarter projects, and they're always the ones that are just, a little bit more weird, a little bit more off kilter, because they can, they know that they can do what they want and have creative control and just kind of get their work out there. So I
Yeah.
always like
Yeah.
hearing about it.
You're cutting out the annoying editor who doesn't know what they're talking about. Who wants you to change everything. Yeah, for me, I mean, my work right now, I do have Patreon supporters, which is great. And then I have Substack. Uh, I have a lot of free Substack posts, but also I have paid subscribers to who get some kind of exclusive stuff. So those are good, ways for me to at least make a little sandwich money.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to segue into, well, basically what you're doing now and, in the immediate future that we have to look forward to, but also, where fans can sort of follow you and keep up with all of that stuff, which you've mentioned some of which already. But we could take one at a time, which is, first of all, other projects that are sort of floating around. You told us about, obviously, your diary comics, your now your two page or less short stories that are daily. But
Yeah.
what else is going on?
So well on at patreon.com/, Whitney Matheson, I post all diary comics. So you can see all of them, 365 a year over there for a very, I gotta say, a very low fee. I think it's like maybe it's $2 a month. I don't know. So that's great. And then over at Substack, it's whitneymatheson.substack.com. And I also post diary comics there along with, um, more a variety of things, stuff that I'm like just things I'm working on, recommendations that are kind of similar to the blog I used to write. So other stuff I've seen or read or whatever that I want to talk about. Um, then the 2024 issue Diary Comics book I'm going to put on sale. I don't know when this goes up, but by the time it goes up, it'll probably be on sale and you can get that in your little hands. And oh my gosh, what else am I working on? I'm always working on too many things. I'm writing 30 short stories in November. So I'll probably be posting some of those on Substack. And then I don't know, you can read some of my children's books on Epic if your kids get that through their school. And then you can watch my movie, Denny Bear. I have two movies actually. One's called Continuity Errors, which I wrote and directed, and the other one, Denny Barracuda, and both of those are on Vimeo if you want to see those.
And where can we mostly find those on Substack or Patreon, or do you have websites or other social media that
Oh, the
um,
films? Yeah,
yeah, we can follow?
you can find them through uh Substack or Patreon, or if you just go to Vimeo, you can search my name and they'll probably come up for you. And if you're really confused, you can find me on Instagram at the Whitney Matheson because there's a Canadian man named Whitney Matheson who took that account before I could get it. And
Our
then you can keep
Canadians.
then you can keep up with me and see other stuff that I'm doing.
All right, everybody. Cool. I loved Whitney. I really was a big fan of hers when Pop Candy was around. Obviously, blogs were all the rage back then, and I read hers regularly. And I'm also a fan of what she's doing now. You should definitely get your hands on Trudy Sellout. That is a great collection of short stories. Her short films are interesting and worth watching. She's done some playwriting. And as I said, the Substack, Patreon stuff, you should definitely check out. And those mini comics are just kind of wry, slice of life um, bursts of joy. I'll put it that way. So definitely check out everything Whitney has going on. I'm sure there's more to come in 2025, but that will do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening, for viewing, for rating, reviewing, subscribing. If I don't see you in the next episodes this week, have a happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.